My pleasure to welcome Hari Padmanabhan. He is the chairman of Encore Group, an early growth stage venture fund, which also helps in the growth and management of companies. It's a pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you very much.
And also what I forgot to introduce you as, that you are the chair for PanIIT India.
That's right.
And one of the pioneering guys who started the chapter of Thai also in Dubai.
That's correct, yeah.
So let's talk about, since you have such an extensive experience in IT and software related products, the markets, when you look now, since India is an emerging story, and you're also based out of Dubai, do you draw some parallels if you look back to the 70s and 80s of the US IT growth phase, and then parallel to the Indian and other emerging markets?
Yeah, I think it's what I would say is that number one, India as an IT brand, where it is today, is a huge asset to anybody who goes out and wants to market Indian IT. And when I first came to quote unquote sell India-based IT products and services into the US in 1988, the experience was excruciating, you know. And there was a very interesting meeting when I was doing my pitch, and about a minute down the pitch I wasn't getting any response from the person, and I turned, and this was in Boston, and I turned around and said, looks like I'm not getting across, is there anything wrong? And he said, yes, there is something wrong. So I said, may I know what? So he said, this cannot be. So I said, what do you mean? He says, look, I've just been introduced to you as somebody who's come from India, 10,000 miles away, and you're talking our stuff. How can you talk our stuff? So I said, because this is what we do for a living, you know, this is what we do day in and day out. So he says, no, this cannot be, I'm sorry, I just can't. So we talked about the weather and everything else, and we stepped out of it, and then I found out that the gentleman, I mean, the person hadn't, there was no global view of things at that time in business, you know, it was all very enclosed, so everyone thought proprietary. This is the days of proprietary technology, everything proprietary. This is my stuff, I will use it, I know about it, it's not for everybody else. So I think that's dramatically shifted. Today, Indian IT is, you don't have to sell Indian IT. You don't have to justify the fact that, or you don't have to get across in, you know, many different ways that you will get the quality that you expect along with an attractive price, you know. And price point as the only means of selling has gone away. Today, there is a certain quality advantage that you can bring about in some cases. Of course, the process adherence in other areas has to be very good. So if you can establish that, I think how you sell IT today is very, very different. In the developing markets, I think it is like it runs you know, one step of the wave behind what happens in some cases, and in other cases, like if you look at how India uses technology today, in many, many ways it's extremely innovative. Many ways it's extremely it's a step ahead of how it is used in developing markets in terms of what do you deploy where, how do you take something to particularly the rural areas, you know, how do you deploy technology in an area where 7/24 power is not guaranteed. So you got to think very differently about how you do what you do, you know, in those markets. And so the pitch is different, the communication is different, what you sell needs to be repositioned in every market, that goes without saying. And but of course, the Indian IT concept is a no-brainer. I mean, you're accepted as the leaders, and that's not an issue, yeah.
So coming to your venture fund, Encore Group,
yeah.
If you look at India, even today, in spite of the rush of pretty much all VC firms from Silicon Valley to invest in India, there's a big number of complaints from entrepreneurs, I'm talking early stage entrepreneurs, that there's not much money coming to them from VCs. And I can argue from both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you are also in that game, and
sure.
you are playing a little different. So I want to understand if you're really investing with early stage entrepreneurs or growth entrepreneurs, I call it.
Right.
And If you are, then how and why are you taking those risks?
I think you touched the core of it. So fundamentally, if you look at the Indian scenario today, that there is money available at the startup stage, angel funding, and there is money available which is, say, $5 million plus. But there is a clear issue with anybody who wants $1 million, couple of $1 million, and which is where and the VCs and the private equity investors who go from the US particularly, their cost of operation is significantly high. They have the best brains out of Harvard and who've been investment bankers who've come on board, and or been in IT and have come on board. So they cost a lot of money, and many of them still have reasonably US based costs or US equivalent costs, and that's where the issue is. And so with those costs, the kind of ticket sizes you can really go into is a little, there's a threshold you've got to set up, because if you go and spend a lot of time below that, you can't really make the return. So I think there's a sweet spot. In fact, I turned that gap into an opportunity, and that's where I think in Encore what we saw was there's a very nice sweet spot in anything between, say, $200,000 to $2 million. That's a spot that not many people want to get into. And also that's a space where, if you look at, say, $1 million investment, but for 5 crores of rupees, is something that you will put in somebody, if you're looking at, depends on how much you take, but let's say you're looking at a company that's currently doing, let's say, 10 to 12, 15 crores of rupees. And those companies are in what we call the early growth stage, which we define as somebody who's got a product or a service. He has figured out how to convert his idea into cash. He's got customers, and they are referenceable, it's working. And what he's got is scalable, and it can go cross-border. It's not something that is local to having to be physically present there. You can go to different markets and take it. And so global scalability is important. Applicability to the markets we address is important. But if that is there, I think that sweet spot in the 3 to 5 year timeline from the time you go in with the investment, I believe will give you a much better return, because a growth, when you take a company from, let's say, 10 crores to about 30 crores, so that's 3 times. But you can do that in about, say, 4 years. You can get there. The kind of return you can get to your investment on that is on the higher side of the 30-35% that people look for at that stage of getting into it. So between it's like people call it mezzanine, if you like. It is not really angel. It is more venture-ish, not quite private equity. That's where I think there's a space.